And I was muted for some reason, so all of that got lost. Okay, yep. Expect technical difficulties. All right, so when you log on to my courses, you will see what I have here. Now, not all of this has information that's populated yet, because as soon as when it says test one, as I record the videos for test one, they're going to be loaded into that module. But if we scroll down here, my name is Mr. Gene. There's my email address. My office number is 241 on this building, second floor in this hallway, about halfway down. My office number is posted, and there are my office hours. Now, you can, the office hours are highlighted in yellow, and these are just my scheduled office hours. If for some reason you cannot come by my office during one of these posted times, you can see that I am available on Friday. So we can make arrangements. But these are my scheduled office hours. And you can see, if I am not in my office, I am in class. So there's not any downtime between 8 and 2:30 outside of my office hour time. Okay, so for starters, one of the big things that you are going to need for this class is access to MyMathLab. Now, you may have used MyMathLab in the past, but if you've never used it for Math 1021 or 1020, you're going to need an access code that works for this semester. Now, there's a couple of places to get your access code. Right now, with the arrangement that LSUE has with a corporation called RedShelf. RedShelf is an online resource distribution tool that allows students to get electronic versions of their course materials on the first day of class without the need of purchasing a textbook. You don't even need to make a trip to the bookstore. What you need, why is that bouncing? Because the projector's bouncing because the room is shaking. And it's not, it's got to be the projector. Anyway, so one of your big tasks before the next class period, as soon as possible, is to log on to my courses. Click on this Bengal Access tool. Bengal Access is the LSUE instantiation of RedShelf. So when you log on to that, when you click this link, it will bring you up a list of all of your classes for which RedShelf is being used. If you do not need the course material for that class, for example, let's say that you purchased an access code through Pearson's website directly, and you didn't need to get the access code from Bengal Access, then you need to opt out of the resource on Bengal Access. It's not an opt-in, it is an opt-out. I suspect everybody in here is going to need it. So unless there is an exception, which you can ask me about before you pull that trigger, then you're almost certainly going to need the access code for this class, and you're likely not going to opt out for this. Now, what this does is it's not free. There is a charge with it. Just like if you were to go to the bookstore and buy a book, it's going to cost to buy the book. Now, Mr. Zorn, the bookstore manager, he has his finger on the pulse of the prices of these, of the access codes, or what RedShelf is charging. It is cheaper than purchasing it directly through Pearson, but I don't know those numbers. He has been one of our points of contact with RedShelf about getting it set up, so he is more likely going to have more detailed information on the prices. Now, you're not going to be asked to pay anything when you click on this link. What's going to happen is if you need that resource, then that fee will get added to your fee statement. Okay, so it's not going to cost anything out of pocket, but it will be added to fee statement. Now, you have 14 days to opt out. If you do not opt out after 14 days, that charge is going to get applied to your fee statement. So in another class, if you already have the book or if you already have the access, then If you don't opt out of it, you will be charged again for that resource. But again, I suspect most of you will need this. And if you have any questions of whether you do or don't, ask me. Now, that link is in a couple of places, but it's right here on the very first page if you just scroll down. But I put it in 2 places in case you happen to be on another page and you can just grab it easier. Okay, so under course syllabus and class policy, I have the departmental syllabus. So this syllabus lays out the description of the course, what the prerequisites are, and other materials such as that. As far as class policy goes, now class policy is different from course syllabus. Class policy are the things that I have the ability to adjust for my class only. That course syllabus is for all 10, 20 classes that abide by. Class policy allows me to set, okay, this is my grading scale. This is how many tests I'm given. This is my makeup policy. This is my attendance policy, those kind of things. That's what's in the policy sheet. And that's where the vast majority of the pertinent information is going to lie. So I am going to talk about a few of these. I'm not going to go through every single link because it's on my courses. You can check it after class. So let's start with materials and resources. So you may be able to see, but I'm getting old and that's harder for me to see. Also, I should mention that if I'm going through a lecture, if there's something that's not clear on the screen, I know that's really tiny print for those of you in the back, it's getting recorded. So if there's anything you miss, you can catch it on the video when it gets posted to my courses. A quick note about, because it's not on this, this policy sheet, but I will mention it now because it just came to mind. I am requiring masks from students in this class. You should have one with you. Given the fact that there is no way to put a desk space between y'all, I'm going to enforce the mask policy for this class. So given the fact that lights are off and y'all are going to be behind masks, there is no chance that I'm going to learn your names quickly. When I was a graduate student at LSU, when I was doing my the student teaching, I would have a tenured faculty professor. They would come by occasionally and just observe us to make certain that we weren't doing something wrong or not teaching effectively or give us suggestions. And one of the suggestions I was given every time by this one guy, he said, you should know all your students' names by the end of the first week. I have 120, I don't know how he does it. I don't know, I don't. Usually my track record is I learn everybody's names just in time for finals. And then I never see them. Now, especially with the fact that y'all are in the dark and I have a light shining in my eyes and y'all are behind masks. If you come to my office and I look at you like I've never seen you before, it's quite possible I've never seen you before. And just tell me what class you're in and I'm happy to help, okay? All right. So on this materials and resources tab, the 2 main things that you need is you're going to need MyMathLab access, 100%. You're going to be doing your homework on MyMathLab. That's where it's going to be graded. When you take a test, you're going to take the test here in class. I'm going to grade it by hand and then post the grades to MyMathLab. I do not use the grade book that's built into my courses. If you want to know what your grade is in a month or in a week, go on MyMathLab, click on the grade book tab, and it will show you, there will be like a link for like show overall score. And that'll give you an idea of where you stand at that particular moment. Second thing you're going to need is a graphing calculator. TI-83, TI-84 are recommended. There are some that are not allowed because they have computer algebra systems in them. Now, fortunately, these are easy to spot because they're really expensive. So, but TI-89, TI-90, nobody's going to have TI-92, but I just included here. But TI-89 has a computer algebra system that I do not allow. But if you've got 83 or 84 or TI Inspire or the plus versions of 83 or 84, those are perfectly fine. Now, if you have another calculator, maybe Casio or Sharp, come by and talk to me and I'll let you know and I'll look at it. I may not know where all the functions are, but I'll tell you if it looks sufficient for this class. What else? All right, so now as far as the textbook goes, if you get the access code through through Bengal Access, you're not going to get a physical copy of the book, but there is an electronic version of the book available on My Math Lab. And when I switch over, I see I've got it open in another tab. When I switch over to that tab, I'll show you where to find the textbook. But the textbook we're using is Algebra and Trigonometry 5th edition by Beecher, Pinna, and Bittinger. Also, now this is not required, but just as optional materials, y'all are probably familiar with a website called Khan Academy. And those are really good short videos that are usually one topic only and to give more examples, or maybe you just need to hear something explained a slightly different way. Maybe I didn't hit it for you exactly like you needed to hear. There are other resources to go out and explore and try to supplement the instruction that you're getting in class. Okay, now, probably what you really want to know is how is my grade going to work in this class? All right, this is a 5-hour course. Math 1021 is a 3-hour course. So we meet 40% more time than they do. And that extra time is designed for the prerequisite material that we have to do. I've never taught 1020 face-to-face before. I've done it online, but I haven't done it face-to-face before. So I'm going to try something and I'm going to learn from what I do this semester. And if I have to make adjustments, I will in the future. But I'm going to take my cue from another instructor who has taught this face-to-face. And we're going to spend the first 4 weeks or so going over the various prerequisite topics. And those are going to be things such as what is interval notation, how to multiply polynomials, how to factor, because factoring is going to be exceptionally useful when we get into chapter 3 and chapter 4. But that's a ways down the line. So we're going to do factoring, sort of stir it up in your memory. And when you actually need factoring later on in chapter 3 or chapter 4, you're going to have these videos you can go back and refresh your memory. So there will be 6 tests. So tests 1 and 2 will be on the prerequisite material. And the first test is looking like it's going to be not this Friday, but next Friday. And it's not going to be long. Tests 1 and 2 are going to be short. They're going to be like 50 minutes. This class meets for an hour and a half. So on that day where we take that test 1, I'll almost certain it's going to work like this. The first 55 minutes of the class will be you taking the exam. And then once that is done, we are going to use that last half hour. So for tests 1 and 2, don't turn your test in and bounce. Stay. Now, for the other tests, you'll be using the full class period. And then when you turn your test in, you will. But tests 1 and 2 are shorter. They're not going to cover as much material. And all of that material is prerequisite material for college algebra. And each of those tests are 5% each. Now, tests 3 through 6, this is where Math 1021, that's the 1021 material. So as soon as we finish test 2, It'll be as if you are in Math 1021. I'm going to teach it just like I would teach them. And on the same pace that I would teach a Tuesday, Thursday, well, I say Tuesday, Thursday, even though we meet Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we meet for an hour and 25 minutes. And on Tuesday and Thursday, the hour classes are an hour and 20 minutes. So our classes this semester are going to mirror what a normal Tuesday, Thursday pace would go on. So altogether, your test is going to be 50% of your grade. So 5% each from tests 1 and 2, 10% each from 3, 4, 5, and 6. Your homework through My Math Lab is 20% of your grade, and the remaining 30% is going to be on the cumulative final exam, which is so far in the future, we ain't even going to worry about it right now. When the final exam comes, we will be given a schedule, like you meet on this classroom on this day at this time, and it will not be in this room. They're going to move us to a different room, but they're not going to do that until November sometime. So, but as soon as I have that information, you will. But it's not going to matter until then. As far as the grading scale, I do have the LSUE grading scale posted here, which LSUE goes off of its standard 10-point grading scale. So 90 to 100 is an A, 80 to 90 is a B, and 70 to 80 is a C, and so on and so forth. Now, even though this says 80 to 89.999% is a B, that's officially what LSU goes off of. I will tell you now that I will round to 0.5%. So if your semester average ends up being 89.5, I'll round that to a 90. But it's got to work how rounding works. If it's 89.49, that rounds down. It does not round up to 90, and that would be a B for that class. So the line's got to be drawn somewhere. No gray area is being allowed, but 0.5% is where I will round, and grades are not up for negotiation. I will not have extra credit you can work. You need to keep up with the homework. Now, the homework is done on My Math Lab. You'll have an infinite number of times to work on a problem until you get it right. And then once you get a problem right, even if you're like, okay, I got it right, but I don't know, I guessed I got it right. I need to try it again. Well, once you get it right, even if you try another problem and get it wrong, you won't take that credit away from you. You'll get to keep trying as much as you like. But for all of your homework assignments, make it a point now to don't leave any points on the table for when the end of the semester comes and you look back and look and think of, okay, those extra points from the homework that I didn't do, that may have been the difference in a letter grade. That may be the difference in whether a student passes or not. And that's happened in the past, where a student will end up with like a 67% average. And maybe they only did half of the homework and only got 10 of the 20%. And that extra homework would have pushed them over the 70% mark and they would have passed. So this 20% from your homework, that should be a lock. You should be able to get that. Now, once, but I'll talk more about the homework when I switch over to that tab. Now, it says due dates right here for now, but there's nothing here because I haven't really paced out all of the due dates for the whole semester yet. So I have the due dates for the first couple of assignments, and a better place for your due dates is My Math Lab. I'll point that out when I switch over to that tab as well. Now, there are other course policies here, such as, let's do the incomplete work, late work, makeup policy. So this policy is easy to remember because I don't do makeup work, period. Now, if you are out for quarantine, that is exception. I will work with you. And if you're out with quarantine, you have contacted student affairs and they know, and I can track that. So if you end up having to go into quarantine and you just tell me, you're going to get an email back from me saying, look, you haven't done so already. you need to tell student affairs, because if you do not tell student affairs and you are out for quarantine, I don't have to make the special accommodations for quarantine students. I mean, I'm happy to do it, but it's got to go through student affairs. Okay, so for incomplete homework, let's say that for some reason you didn't finish a homework assignment and the due date closed. The due date's going to be at 11:59 on whatever date that I've set for it to close. Now, what's going to happen is that any problem that you didn't answer is going to start off being marked as incorrect. You're not going to get any credit at all. But you are able to go in and finish those problems for 50% of the credit you would have gotten. Now, it won't affect the problems that you did before the due date. It'll only affect the ones that you are turning in late. But hopefully that's not an issue, right? Right. Okay. Now, as far as tests goes, obviously, again, going back to quarantine, if you are out on the day of the scheduled test, I will work with you. Do not come to campus. We're quarantined. If you are on any of the athletic teams and you're going to be out for an away game on a day I'm taking a test, you'll know that ahead of time because you'll know at least a week in advance. So when a test is, for example, do you remember when I'm expecting the first test to be? A week from this Friday. So Friday of next week. You will know in plenty of time when the test is. And if you are on an athletic team, you need to arrange to get that test before you go. If you wait till after, you make it harder for me to give a makeup. And my policy is that I don't give a makeup after the due date, after the test date. Now, things happen. You get an accident on the way to campus. Obviously, you're not going to make it that day. If you miss a test, what's going to happen is a 0 temporarily goes in for that assignment. Why did he say temporarily? Because what I do at the end of the semester is I go back and I look at all your tests you've taken. Now, for what I'm about to say, this applies to tests 3, 4, 5, and 6, the 1021 college algebra material. Tests 1 and 2 are not going to get affected by what I'm about to say. So let's say that somebody misses test 3. Okay, well, I'm going to wait till the final exam is taken. And then I'm going to look at your final exam. Let's say that there are 40 problems. I don't remember how many problems on the final exam, but let's say that there are 40 problems and 10 of those came from test 1. Let's say the first 10. I'm sorry, came from test 3. Well, I'm going to look at those first 10 problems and say, how many of those 10 did this student get right? If you got 8 out of those 10 right, that's 80%. That 80% will go back as your test 3 score. And I'm going to do that for the lowest test score of any student, not just if you miss tests. So if you have a bad test, don't let it be, don't beat yourself up about it. Don't let it keep you up at night. That there is an opportunity later to have that test grade possibly adjusted depending on your final exam performance. Now, let's say you had an 80% on test 3, and that was the lowest score out of those 3 grades, out of those last 4 tests. I'm going to look at your final exam. I'm going to look at those test 3 problems. Remember, there were 10 of them. If you got 7 out of those 10 right, that's 70%. Well, that was lower than the lowest score that you had. It will not change your existing score. But if you got 9 out of 10 correct, then a 90% would replace your 80%. I only do this for 1 test grade, whichever one is lowest. If you miss 2 tests, I only do it for the first, whichever the first one came chronologically, and a 0 will stay in for the other. Okay. All right. Now, that I have stalled long enough, and I think everybody who's coming today is already here. I don't think I see an empty chair. Oh, there's one in the back, maybe two. So here is how attendance is going to be done. I do keep attendance. It's not part of your grade, but I am going to, at the end of the semester, if a student appeals a grade, part of the data I'm going to collect is how often was this student in class. So here is what I'm going to be doing for attendance. Now, this is going to show up on my screen. It's not going to show up on yours because you don't need to know when everybody else was attending class. So what I would like you to do now is take your phone out. This is going to be the only time that I'm going to recommend taking your phone out in the middle of class. What we're about to do right now, you are normally going to do either the 5 minutes before class or the 5 minutes after class starts. Once I start teaching the class, if you show up 15 minutes late, you have just missed attendance for that day. And no, I am not going back in and flagging you for it. If you want attendance for a day, you be here on time and you scan the code that I'm about to put on the screen. So in the future, I plan to be down here before 7:55. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up lecture attendance. And now you can see that for today, I've extended it until 9 o'clock because I knew that I had stuff to talk about first. So what I'm going to do is open up that QR code. So your phones should have QR code readers built into the camera. If not, there are QR code apps that you can download for your phone, but most of them already have it installed. Now, part of the question that I've got is that I wanted to see is, and I think it's what you're just experiencing. If you are sitting on that side of the classroom, this code is at an angle to you and it may not scan properly. If you're aware of that, just note where you're sitting right now. And if you have a problem scanning it, this will be up before 5 minutes before class. You'll be able to walk around, scan it, and then sit back down. Yeah. Yeah. Talk amongst yourselves. I guess I have to show that. Refresh your, close it and try it again. Has anybody been able to successfully log in? And it'll ask you to select present, late. Yes, sir. Yes, I'm going to. Yeah, I didn't do that. Try again. I'm curious to see how well this works, because I really don't want to pass a sign-in sheet to 30 different people when there's a virus going on right now. And it's liable to the fact that when you turn in your tests, your tests are likely going to get Lysol before you get them back. So, but this is how, I mean, there are other attendance alternatives. I could call attendance, which would just take so much time. iClicker is another resource, but I have not exactly had the best experience with iClicker. Some instructors swear by it. I haven't agreed.
Present and save changes.
Yes, select present and save changes. This will be open from 5 minutes before 7:55 to 8:05. If you're late, you're late. Don't send me an email going, oh, you know I was here, right? No, I don't. Yes, sir. Okay, no, the password's encoded in here. This is to allow me to sort of keep security on this, and that you can't just send the code to a friend of yours, because it does lock down your IP address. So even, let's say you have a friend of yours that didn't come to class that day, and your friend is like, look, just here's my login information, scan me in. Well, once you log in, your IP address is going to be locked out for 20 minutes. That's longer than what the window for the attendance scan is going to be open for. So you're not going to be able to scan for a friend. Have y'all been successful with this? Has it worked? Is anybody not? Well, what's it telling you? Okay.
Are you using the MyLC password?
Yeah, that's what it should be. If you're having problems with your password outside of class, like just open up your browser and go to My Courses and log in through there and see if it will let you in. If it does not, you should go by OIT and tell them, I cannot reset your password. I can't help you with that. So now, worst case scenario, you forget, or it's just not, is it not working for you? What's it telling you?
I can't scan it and I don't want to get out because
We'll try it. I won't bite you.
time.
She might, but I won't bite you.
It's not letting me.
Okay. It's just what's it? Is it just not scanning it at all?
It did it the first. There we go.
This is why it's going to be open before class, y'all. Okay. So, but this is how attendance is going to work. I'm going to try to make sure I'm down here in plenty of time. Okay. So with that said, now, if I click on this, see, I don't want to click on something right now and mess it up. I'll figure this out outside of class, but all right. Speaking of, while it's on my mind, on test days, given the fact that you are in the dark and you are going to be behind a mask, I'm not going to know who you are. So on test days, you should take it to the bank. When you turn your test in, I'm going to ask to see your ID. Bring it with you to class. I did this in the spring, and there was a couple guys that apparently they keep their ID out in their car, and they had to run out to their car to go get it. I will not grade your test without seeing an ID associated. I'll remind you the day before, but I'll just make certain that it's communicated now. Yes.
I have a question about the My Math Lab.
Yep.
How do we set that up?
Okay. We'll talk about that.
Okay.
Okay. So for My Math Lab, now you're going to go, remember, let's make the assumption that you have gotten your access code through the Red Shelf tool. So now you have your access code. What you can do is, if you go back to this policy sheet, let's scroll down, and I'm going to click here where it says My Math Lab. And if you scroll down, there's the instructions on how to create an account and log into this class on My Math Lab. And the course ID is provided in here. So it's Gene 00629. I know those of you in the back can read all that. So, but it's there on My Courses. So where it says enter the access code that came with your textbook, that's the access code that you got from Red Shelf. Okay, so this video at the bottom, it says inclusive access, but that's what Bingo Access was called before it was renamed a few semesters ago. So this video just shows how Red Shelf works, but it is very easy. And once you access it and get the code, you're probably never going to click on that tool for this class for the rest of the semester. You'll be doing all of your work through my math lab. All right, so let's say that you have followed those instructions. You have enrolled yourself into the course. And here it is, Math 1020, Section 1 for fall 2021. And here's where all of your assignments are. Remember when I was talking about due dates a little while ago? You can see exactly when the due dates are for your assignments. Now, for the first two assignments, interval notation is what I plan to be starting today. We may even finish interval notation. It's not that long of a section. But generally, when I finish a section, let's say that we do interval notation today. My general rule is I give you 2 class period time to complete that assignment before it closes. So if this were a usual day, as opposed to being first day of class, then if we do this section on Monday, expect it to close Friday night at 11:55 p.m. If you did it on Wednesday, if I finished it on Wednesday, you should expect it to close on Monday at 11:55. Just take 2 class periods. Now that counts if we're like, for example, like the day you take the test 1, Friday of next week, I believe it's that next Monday, that's Labor Day. Well, I wouldn't count that as a class period. So whatever, if we finish a section, and we're not, but if we were to do a section that finished on that Friday, I would count Wednesday and Friday of the next week because you missed Monday. It didn't count as a class meeting. And notice that most of the assignments don't have due dates in here. That's why the due date tab was empty on my math lab or my courses, because I haven't paced out 3.5 months worth of work for this class yet. But I'm pretty confident we will finish interval notation, and I expect to be done with exponents and dividing and polynomials by monomials by end of class on Wednesday. So these sections, now I think for the first test might go up to here or here. I don't know exactly what, but about half of this material is going to be on test 1, the other half of the JIT. That JIT stands for just in time. That's the prerequisite material. If you scroll down below all this, the JIT sections, you'll see section 1.1 eventually. Right here, right between the JIT and the 1.1, that's where test 2 is. So the section 1.1, that's going to be the beginning of the material for test 3. This is where Math 1021 starts. We have some other stuff first. And given the fact that this section, you can see how many of these deal with rational expressions. It's natural to put those together on a test. So it's liable that the fact that these rational expression sections are going to be test 2, and the other sections at the beginning are going to be on test 1. That's my estimate right now for how the breakdown is going to be. I can adjust that if I need to, but we're going to do the best we can with what we've got. And besides, we don't know what we're doing in a month. In a month, the university may say, look, we're closing. Everybody's going completely online for the rest of the semester. What are we going to do then? I don't know. We'll figure something out. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. That's what we had to do in spring of 2020. And at midterm, we went all online. That was hectic, to say the least. But at least now if something happens, I know I have a plan of action of how to go about getting the lecture material to you. Right now, we're going to assume that we are meeting face-to-face all semester long until we're told differently. And if we're told differently, we will cross that bridge when we get to it, okay? All right. Also, I should mention that you're not going to see this for these homework sections that don't have due dates yet. But if I open up the interval notation, this first one, notice it says 50% deducted from questions completed after the due date. That's going back to what I said on the incomplete policy. But if I come down here to multiplying polynomials, it has no due date. So if I open this up, notice that it does not say that now, because it won't let me put that setting on unless there's a due date, unless MyMathLab knows when it closes. So as I start adding in due dates, I'm going to be adjusting the settings to allow for that. Right now, with the way this is set, once it closes, you cannot make any adjustments to it. I want to change the settings as we get there. But those settings are changed for these first two assignments. Now, some of these sections are pretty short. The interval notation section, there's only 14 problems here. And the JIT sections will typically be shorter. They're prerequisite material. There's stuff that you've probably seen before. And some of this, I'm going over in class and you're like, look, I already know this. Great. Not everybody in here might. So, but as you start getting later into the material, like let's scroll down to the 1.1 and just kind of know what to expect. Look what happens when I open section 1.1. There are 30 problems for this one section. And the rest of the sections from this point on are not short either. So this is not something you want to wait till 6 hours before it closes to try and cram it all in. You risk it closing and not getting the full credit for it. As soon as we start a section, you should take it upon yourself that, okay, you should start the homework. Now, you may not be able to finish that homework. Maybe I haven't finished a section yet. Maybe there's other topics in that section that I haven't quite covered, and I'll do it in the next class period. You may be able to do the first 10 problems, though, and at least get started. Okay. There's the student grade book. I can never remember if it's just grade book or student grade book. It depends on the individual class. But where here it says overall score, right now I have a 0. I haven't done anything. So, but if I click show calculation, it will break down all of my homework score. Now, okay, I'm glad I did this because I need to adjust these. This is supposed to be like 20%. It's supposed to be tests 1 and 2 broken apart from 3, 4, 5, and 6. So I have to adjust the weights, but I'll fix that. But that is where you go to check what is my grade right now. Okay, now as far as your textbook goes, let's see, is it here? Okay, yeah. Okay, so not every book section has this e-text contents on here. So the JIT review, the just in time. Now, I may not cover, I'm covering interval notation. I'm not going to be covering absolute values. So a lot of these topics in here, we are going to be talking about. Principle of zero products, we're going to be talking about in chapter 3 when we get there. But this is just an overview of the types of techniques or things that we need to be aware of as we're going through. My first section that I have prepared is on interval notation. There it is right there. And it's got a video, it's got the e-text, and it's got a study plan, but that study plan comes built into the course, and instructors can customize that. I never have, and that study plan is not part of your grade. But if I click e-text here, it should. Perfect. Okay, this is just what the physical copy of the book looks like. So all the information is here. The textbook is also available in another section, and I'll show you that as well. If I go to video and resource library, I get this menu that comes up. Now remember, if you don't remember where all this stuff is, it's being recorded, assuming that this recording goes out and everything is fine. But this will be posted. You can go back and see where all this stuff is. So let's say that, okay, there's the cover of the textbook that we're using, that bright orange book. But if I want to see the section 1.1 pages from that textbook, then I'm going to select chapter 1, and I have to select the section 2. And then I'm going to select multimedia textbook. And look, it comes up down here, introduction to graphing. And there are also videos available. If you want to see video more examples worked out, if you select video, and you can't see it all the way down at the bottom, but there's like 9 or 10 examples down here at the bottom. That's short videos that range from just a few minutes long, that deal with 1, maybe 2 problems. So if you want to see more examples of what the kind of problems I worked in class, there are some videos to go back and look at. Okay. I think that is going to bring us to the end of what I wanted to explain on the first, at least for the class policy goes. We are starting the first section. So this has taken longer than normal. I mean, we're already 50 minutes into the class, but ordinarily, as soon as the attendance code gets brought down, we're going to start the material for that day. So, also, I like getting feedback from you as I'm going through a lecture. I don't like the feeling of just standing up here at the front of the classroom, barking at you for 3.5 months and then just grading the test. If I am going through a slide and explaining something and you don't, let's say there's just something about that problem that you don't understand, where I got a particular number from, call out to me, because y'all are lost in shadow right now. I can't see. And if you ask a question, I'm going to restate the question for the benefit of the people who are not getting the audio right now. But don't hesitate, just get my attention some way or another, and we can get your question answered. Okay. With that being said, does anybody have any questions before we get started?
Yeah, how do you get to Wi-Fi? Because I live in the
I honestly, I don't know. The student, the password, it's your My Courses ID. That's the Wi-Fi password for students. If you have trouble with your particular device, maybe go by OIT on the 2nd floor of the C building. They can handle technical issues. Especially if you've got a question about an Apple phone. I am not the person to ask about that. Cannot help. Not going to try. Okay. If you do not have questions now, that's fine. My email address is on my courses. Send me an email, talk to me about it, and we'll work something out. All right. So let me. There we go. Now we can see the whole screen. I don't have much real estate over here in the corner, so if anybody on this side of the classroom has trouble seeing anything right here as we go through the semester, just note that, remember, all this stuff is being recorded. You can flesh it out on when the recording gets posted. And because I'm recording this, I remember when I was in math courses in undergraduate, there were classes that I spent the entire time just furiously writing down, and I was missing the explanation that the instructor was talking about in the course of it. If you want to focus on what I'm saying as I go through the problems and then get your notes from the video later, you're welcome to do that. But do not take what I just said as a recommendation for you to not take notes. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you can get your notes, but if you want to use the class time to mainly key into what I'm saying so that if you've got questions, you're ready to ask them, then I can do that then. All right, so for interval notation, in this class, we're going to be working with quite a few inequalities, especially when we start getting like solutions of inequalities, or when we talk about domain and range of functions later on. So being accustomed to describing sets of numbers is going to be efficient. So we can do that in one of two ways. We can either do that with an inequality, or we can use an interval to describe that inequality. Both of them do the same thing, but they do it in slightly different ways. And there's also a third method called set notation. I'll mention that as well. It is in your homework. And I'm not going to be using it, but I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, so interval and inequality notation, they're used to refer to part of the number line. So when we talk about inequalities, there's going to be four that we're going to be focused on. There is less than or equal to, greater than, and greater than or equal to. And notice when I say the or equal to part, there's a line that's drawn beneath that respective inequality. Now there is a fifth inequality symbol that is not going to be a part of this. And that fifth inequality symbol is not equal to. It's just an equal sign with a line into it. That's not really going to be what we're using. We're going to be using these four inequality symbols. Now, as far as the inequality symbols goes, just remember that the symbol opens in the direction of the larger side. So when I say that A is less than B, B is the larger quantity here. Likewise, when I say A is greater than B, again, the larger quantity is always going to be on the side that the inequality symbol opens in the direction of. Okay. Now, for interval notation, it looks something like this, where we have the starting point going from left to right. This is the starting point of the region, and this is the ending point. Now, parentheses are always used on the side where you have plus or minus infinity, and it's always used if it's less than or greater than. If it says less than or equal to or greater than or equal to, different story. You're going to use a bracket instead of a parenthesis. So here are two examples of what an interval notation may look like. Now, if you're familiar with ordered pairs from graphing like an XY point on the plane, that's kind of what this looks like. But that's not what this is in this context. This is the set of all numbers from negative infinity, strictly less than 5. I'm using a parenthesis here, so this is not including 5 in the set. So this is really, if I wanted to say this in words, this is all real numbers less than 5. So brackets are used if you want to include the endpoint in that set. So notice that now it is possible to have a bracket on one side and a parenthesis on the other, and there will be cases this semester where that's going to come up. But we're going to just take it on a case-by-case basis. Does your inequality have less than or greater than? If that's the case, you're going to be using parentheses. Less than or equal to and greater than or equal to are going to be using brackets on those sides. And notice right here, I used a bracket on this -1/2 side, but because the higher end has infinity, then I have to use a parenthesis there. The bracket means you are including the number in the set. You never want to use a bracket for infinity or negative infinity because infinity is not a number. It is a concept. You can't do algebraic manipulation with infinity. In fact, infinity is really weird. It does things you don't expect. All right, so let's just pretend we have our number line. And the number line can be centered at any value, depends on where the focus of your interval is. Here, because I don't have an inequality that I'm working with, I'm just starting from a neutral point, 0 in the middle, and I've got positive numbers on the right, I've got negative numbers on the left. And what you don't see labeled, and I put it on this next slide, is that now you can see where plus and minus infinity are. Negative infinity represents this left arrow that points in the direction of the negative numbers. Positive infinity represents the arrow on the right that points to larger and larger positive numbers. And here I've put a scale of 1 because every tick mark represents an increase of 1 value on my number line. So when I'm given an inequality and I'm being asked to graph that inequality, what that means is take this number line and highlight a portion of it that represents the inequality that I'm working with. Now, whether you call it highlighting the line or shading the line, doesn't matter. So long as you can differentiate it from the original number line that was there. Okay, so here's an example of what inequality notation looks like. It's just an inequality that's involving our variable. Now, for what we're going to be doing in this class, we're going to be working with inequalities that have x on one side or the other. Does not matter which one, but it's x by itself. If it is not by itself, we have to do some algebraic manipulation to get x by itself first before we look at its interval notation. And that's going to come up in section 1.6 when we get into the test 3 material. So that's coming. So for right now, the inequalities are going to start with just x by itself on either the left or the right. So if I were to look at the number line, what does this say? This says the set of all values of x such that x is less than or equal to 3. So when I say less than 3, I'm talking about numbers to the left of 3. So you just identify where 3 is on the number line, shade everything to its left, and notice that I shaded the arrow too, because it didn't say that there was a stop, there was a lowest value. Negative 1,000, negative 1 billion is all less than or equal to 3. But I stopped at 3 on the right-hand side. And because I had less than or equal to, I put a bracket to cap it off. And now I can look at this graph and say, okay, I know to include 3 in that set. Okay, I forgot I put that. So we've got some problems here where we're going to start with the inequalities and we're going to look at what the interval conversions are. Now, I think for all of these problems, I didn't write down what the graph looks like. You can graph that for yourself outside of class, but we want to get accustomed to not only see a set of numbers described as an inequality, but it being described as an interval as well. Now, we've already done this first one. -infinity to 3. Remember, the interval notation, here's the lower value, here is the higher value, and the only thing left is, do you cap off the endpoints or not? And notice there is a comma that separates between them. Now, there's going to be some times where the shade, that if you look at the shaded region of the graph, it looks like there's a gap between the shaded region. So it looks like there's a hole in the graph in the middle. We'll talk about that later when we get to it. So if I have x is greater than 4, well, values of x that satisfy this inequality are 5, 6, 4.5, 4.1, 4.01. I can get infinitely close to 4, but notice that 4 itself fails this inequality because 4 is not greater than 4, it's equal to it. So I do not want to include 4 in this interval, but 4 marks the lower boundary. I want to keep everything bigger than 4, so I want the right-hand side. Yes?
If 4 is an endpoint, why doesn't it have a parenthesis on it? I mean,
Okay,
the bracket.
it's because this had a greater than, less than, or equal to.
So the bracket only applies when it has the line underneath?
Yes, yes. If it does not have the line, you're going to put a parenthesis right there. But you always use parentheses for plus or minus infinity. Never bracket there. So for something like this, -1 is less than x is less than 2. Now, there are two values that I'm interested in. This says that x is sandwiched between those two values. This is literally telling you where the interval starts and where it stops. The only thing we got to do now is decide, do you include the endpoints or not? Well, look at this one. It does not have the equal part, so we do not include -1. This inequality does not have the equal part, so we do not include the 2. So it just looks like that. The last case, well, now we do include the 0. Do not include the 7. So if it is strictly less than or strictly greater than, use parentheses. If it is less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, that's where brackets come in. By the way, if your interval was all real numbers, well, your interval would look like it would start at -infinity with a parenthesis, and it would stop at positive infinity with a parenthesis. So when you see -infinity to infinity, that is essentially the same thing as saying all real numbers. Okay, here is something that when I was working, preparing these slides, I wasn't going to mention set notation because inequality notation is built into it, but it is in your homework. If you were to work your homework set, you will see it, and I want you to know what it means when you do see it. So it looks like this, where you've got those braces, and then you have an X followed by a vertical line, and then you have an inequality following it. Now, that inequality that's in that set notation, that is the inequality like we saw in the previous screen. So here's an example of what a set notation would look like. Now, the way you read this is the braces here tell you that everything inside is part of the same set. So I would read this as the set of all values of x such that x is less than or equal to 3. That vertical bar represents the phrase such that. So, but this part of it right here, that's the interval notation from the previous screen. And set notation has its uses, but interval notation will, and inequality notation will accomplish the same thing. And again, this set notation, it's the same example that I've just worked in a couple places already. This is equivalent to saying this interval. And especially when we start getting into the 1021 material, whenever I'm referring to sets of numbers, I'm almost exclusively going to be using interval notation. So it's important that we understand how it works and like how would you graph this? Well, fortunately, the interval notation gives you an idea of where the shaded portion of the graph is, because you're going to shade everything between the starting point and the ending point. And you've just got to decide, do you put parentheses or brackets on the end points? And the interval notation tells you. Some of you may have graphed on a number line using open and closed circles. The open circles correspond to parentheses. The closed circles correspond to brackets. I am going to be dealing exclusively with the parentheses and the brackets, because it carries over to the shading and the interval notation exactly, without having to pair them up. Okay, so reading this out, it says the set of all numbers such that x is that -2 is less than or equal to x, which is less than 2. And I want to write this in interval notation. Now we're going to see this these kind of inequalities more in section 1.6, but this is what we call a compound inequality. It's one statement that has two inequalities in it. Now, notice that the inequalities are both pointing in the same direction. One of them has an equal part and one of them does not. That's okay, but they're both pointing in the same direction. They can never point in opposite directions. So whenever you're trying to write an interval notation out or an inequality notation, if you're writing an inequality of this type, they can all point in the same direction, either open to the right or open to the left, but it's got to be consistent across the entire statement. You can't mix and match here. But what this says is x, the set that we're interested in, is between -2 and 2. So shade that region and shade and put put a bracket on -2, put a parenthesis on +2. So interval notation, that's what it looks like. Now here, we're being asked to graph this as well as the interval notation. Now, here I have the equal part on both of these inequalities. So my interval is going to have brackets on both sides. But I'm just going to sketch a number line. I'm not looking for perfection here. You don't need to worry about, I need to get out a ruler and equally space these. No. Just for this problem right here, the only two numbers that matter that you have to mark on the number line are the -3 and the 2. But you got to put them in the right order. Smaller numbers always go on the left, the larger numbers always go on the right. So with this number line here, I can see that I'm going to shade everything between -3 and 2. But I've got to cap both sides with brackets. And now once I have shaded this, the interval notation is read directly from that. The brackets are in the same places and the starting and the end point are the same. Look at the difference in this problem. This says, look at the inequality. It's a simple inequality, not a compound inequality. There's only one inequality symbol there. So this says the set of all x values such that x is less than -1. So I'm going to look at the number line. The only number that really matters that I have to mark is the -1. Am I going to shade to the left or the right to get numbers that are less than -1? I'm going to shade to the left. So I'm going to shade all of this. Do I include one or -1 or not? No. Yeah. There it is. And the interval notation follows from it. If your graph included the left arrow, then your interval starts at -infinity with a parenthesis. And positive infinity can never be a left endpoint. Negative infinity can never be a right endpoint. If you're going to use negative infinity, it will always be on the left. If you're going to use positive infinity, it's always going to be on the right. Okay, so what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to leave this up here, but I'm going to stop for now. So you've got these 4 inequalities. Well, what we're doing here is we're taking interval notation, and I want you to convert them back into inequalities. So it's the reverse of what we've just been doing. So I'll give you the answers to these problems first thing on Wednesday. But see if you can't figure out what they are. So that is going to end this for today.